a Christian, grew up in that tradition. But I decided, let me research Lucifer. Well, what you find out is there's only in the Old Testament, or what we would call the Hebrew Bible, or the Torah, depending on and the rabbinic text, there's only one mention that quote unquote talks about Lucifer, but it doesn't. There's the prophet Isaiah, Isaiah 14:12. I'm bad with numbers. It's either 12:14 or 4. I think it's 14:12. At that point, the Israelis have been thrown out of Jerusalem. Babylon now occupies Jerusalem. And so the prophet Isaiah is predicting the fall of Babylon and the return of the Jews to Jerusalem. Well, I think it's 14:12, he's talking about the king of Babylon, presumably. It's probably Nebuchadnezzar II, maybe his son. But he talks about, he's taunting this king and the fact that this king is going to fall from grace. And he calls him he that is the torchbearer. In Hebrew, that's the word Hallel. And so what happens is the word Hallel, as he is the torchbearer, gets translated during the Christian era into Greek. And the Greek word is hiasphos. And that forms as part of the early Christian Bible that's often referred to as the 70. Well, that gets translated into the Vulgate, the earliest Latin Bible. Well, in Latin, the word for he that carries a torch takes the word Lucifer, lowercase l. It also is the term used for the rising star Venus in the morning star. So Lucifer, lowercase l, appears in that context, and it actually appears a couple other times in the Bible, but again, referring to someone who's literally carrying a torch. Well, what happens is when it eventually gets changed over into English, Old English at the time, some scholar decides that clearly it should have been capitalized. So Lucifer becomes capitalized and a proper name.
Ah.
Well, but bear in mind, prior to that point, so, all throughout the medieval period, the early Renaissance and Reformation, Lucifer, there are saints named Lucifer. There were bishops named Lucifer. It was not considered a negative name. So it gets introduced into the early English version of the Bibles. When the King James version of the Bible was published, it uses the capital L. And then, as you know, that becomes the dominant biblical text. But even still, Lucifer wasn't a bad guy all throughout that time. It just was a capital name. Well, in 1909, there was a Bible published called the Concordance Bible.
Oh, yes.
And what made that Bible special was that was the first Bible in 1,000 years that actually had notes in the margins. And so, it would try to explain the passages to people who didn't read, at that point, King James English. Well, this was published, by the way, in America. Well, in the Concordance Bible, the passage for Isaiah 14:12 says that the term Lucifer here clearly refers to the fallen angel Satan. And in and of itself, you'd think, okay, that's just one little note in the book.
Right.
Well, it turns out the Concordance Bible became the most published book in the world. It became pretty much the standard version of the King James Bible throughout America. And it has sold more than any other book on the planet. When it became public domain in the 1960s, late 50s, early 60s, it was translated back into foreign languages, carrying Lucifer as a capital letter with the note that it was Satan. So that is the basis of our entire belief that Satan exists, or not that Satan, excuse me, that Lucifer is Satan. Satan is a named figure in both the Hebrew text and the modern text, but he is not Lucifer. But that's where Lucifer comes from. It was a typo.
That's astounding.
Well, and part of what put me on this trail, last, I think it was March or April, whenever Easter was last year, the Pope gives every year at Easter. There's a very specific set of prayers that the Pope always does. It's tradition for thousands of years, or for not thousands, but for over 1,000 years, the popes have given the same prayer. Well, the internet trolls realized that it used the word Lucifer in it 3 times. And so they claim that this proves the Pope is a Satan worshiper. Well, what it turns out is that if you actually read the prayer, it refers to Jesus as the light bearer. So it's Jesus Lucifer.
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, so yeah, it's bizarre to see how little things like that take on a life of their own.
Isn't that just the way that the world rolls, though?
Yeah, it's crazy. It really
is crazy. But especially for something, that seems so innocuous. And
yep.
Now you can't name your child Lucifer.
Nope.
Yeah. Or you're going to be featured in the Omen 57 or something. I did
get a thank you for my efforts. And, I'm like I said, I'm not Catholic. I'm Anglican. But in the way of a thank you, I was sent one of the new English versions of the official exorcism book. You can't buy these. You can't, beg, steal, whatever. So I really felt honored that.
That's huge.
Because I've had one in Latin. The exorcism ritual for hundreds of years, they used the 1614 Roman Catholic rite to perform exorcisms. In 1998-ish, it was revised, and only 2 years ago was it approved in English, or 3 years ago now. Was it approved in English? And you only got it if you were part of the exorcism, Office of Exorcism, or you attended the official Vatican exorcism classes. And I was just beyond thrilled at the fact that I was able to be given one. So,
well, that's just absolutely unexpected, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. But I've had a lot of really great people that I've encountered over the years that have taken some of what I've done to heart. And, just like you mentioned that, you heard me and that you wanted to get one of my books. I've got some really great people out there that have said, hey, I appreciate this, and let me share it with someone. Or, and that's literally what happened. There was someone who escalated it up the hierarchy with the Roman Catholic Church, and that came as a reward, I guess. So
that's just fascinating. I mean, I know that you are my go-to if I have questions about a case that I think may be demonic. I've kind of worn out my book because it's a little dog-eared, but that's okay. It's it rides in my car with me a lot. So, especially lately, because, I've been having to go and sit and wait and do all those things with, testing and stuff like that. So I've had time to read and reread and read some more. For the longest time, I would just fall asleep, not because of the content, but, you are who I go to. So it's nice to know that the Vatican agrees with me.
Well, I didn't get a ringing endorsement, but for me that was a real honor.
Well, I know that I don't know. I have somebody in chat that questions your experience on Lucifer. He feels that that's not factual, but how much time did you spend documenting and reading and gaining this knowledge on that topic? You researched that
About,
for quite some time.
yeah, probably in total a little over 4 months,
Yeah.
but that's 4 months going through. And I mean, you can find it easily if you go out to. Well, there's a plethora of information. For instance, you can go out and look at some of the websites that compare the biblical texts. You can look at it in Greek. You can look at it in Hebrew. You can look at it in different translations. Some of them are from the Arabic. So that's one resource right away. You can see exactly how it's look in the Hebrew and see exactly what the word is in Hebrew. You can look at the word origins in Hebrew. And if you go through and follow that particular set of passages through, it's self-evident. You can actually see one thing I immediately tell people who question, could this really be? The word Lucifer is Latin. It did not exist prior to Latin. So it could not have been in the Old Testament, which is derived from the Hebrew texts, prior to that invention. And that's why when you look at the old Hebrew text, you'll see it's Hallel. It's actually, when you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, they actually have that passage in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The word Hallel is conjugated a little differently, which could still mean light bearer, but it also, another one could mean to rush with light, a slight variation. But it's in the Dead Sea Scrolls, so you can actually go and look and see. And I've got for my new book, whenever I get it finally finished, I've actually got the photograph of that passage from the actual Dead Sea Scrolls.
How did you get access to the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Because a lot of them have been photographed and made public, and so I just scoured basically the internet till I found the page that had the page that had the Isaiah section.
Oh, how
and
cool.
From there it's a matter of trying to figure out the ancient Hebrew, because it's radically different than modern Hebrew. But there's a lot of resources. If you want to dig into it, they're there. I'm not by any means a Hebrew scholar, but I can stumble through it a little bit, and there's smarter men than me and smarter women than me that have already done that. So you can find it. Even if you just go Google, Lucifer, and don't just take the surface entries. You say origin of the name Lucifer. There's a lot of good scholarly works out there that people have already done some of the same legwork.
Well, I'm going to research it just because I want to say that I researched the Dead Sea Scrolls. But
Yep.
We are at our second break. This is 2 minutes, guys, and we will be back on the flip side with Kyl Cobb here on Paranormal Experienced.